Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. And let's look now at the foreign policy scene. And this is the collapse of the U.S. position worldwide continues. We are now 1 year after the attempted color revolution in Iran, the green coup. And you remember that we were supposed to embrace Mousavi, the butcher of the 1980s, the guy who led the human wave assaults didn't lead them, he ordered them or facilitated them by young children against the Iraqi lines in the Iran-Iraq war. So they dredged him up, and we'll remember the famous, the role of the desperate housewives of North Tehran, the rich elitists, and others in supporting this Mousavi candidacy, who wanted internet freedom, or as Ahmadinejad was going with economic benefits for poor peasants and poor workers, the wretched of the earth. So you get the idea. 1 year after the failed green coup, Ahmadinejad is clearly stronger than ever, and I think it's a mistake to continue to refer to this as a mullah regime. Ahmadinejad is a general of the Pastaran Revolutionary Guards, and this Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, anyway, whatever his name is basically in eclipse. So the green color revolutionaries have totally failed, and we have an interesting, the litany coming from the U.S. is that Iran is isolated. The reactionary neocon Krauthammer, for his own anti-Obama purposes, writes an interesting column today, Friday, June 11th, in the Washington Post, that Iran's isolation is a myth. Yes, it's a myth. There is no isolation of Iran. Rather, the U.S. is getting isolated from its own allies. Now, we did have, at midweek, the vote in the UN Security Council in favor of these sanctions. It's the fourth round of sanctions. Now, as many have pointed out, under Mad Dog Bush the Younger, we had 3 rounds of sanctions against Iran that were always passed unanimously in the UN Security Council. Russia, China all voted for them, and everybody else voted for them. Now, different story. It unfortunately, and I regard this as a blunder, the Russians and Chinese have gone along with the U.S. in finally voting these sanctions, although they have also weakened them, watered them down, hollowed them out. We'll go through this in a minute. But the big change now, and this is really a watershed of international affairs, that Brazil and Turkey vote against the U.S. They vote no. Turkey, ally of the U.S. in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the Atlantic Pact, NATO. Without Turkey, U.S. power projection in the Middle East is cut in half, at least, without that Incirlik air base and some other things that the Turks provide. And Brazil, of course, a member of the Inter-American System, Organization of American States. That's the old Rio Pact. So these are both, on paper, close allies of the U.S., and they vote no. And this rankles. We see the genocidal bureaucrat Robert Gates, the Brzezinski man running the Pentagon, complaining still about how dare those Turks vote against us at the UN. But they did. What this means is world affairs are changing. It used to be that the great strategic high-level politics of the world, the grande politique at a strategic level, this was the monopoly of the permanent five, the U.S., the British, the French, the Chinese, the Russians, a couple of others. But now we have the upstarts. We have the third world. We have the developing countries, Turkey and Brazil, saying, no, we have a worldwide say. Brazil is in Latin America, but it gets to do something about the affairs of the Middle East. It's all interconnected, as they like to say. Yes, indeed. So this is now something different. And you can see that there's an irrational reaction of clubbiness on the part of the permanent five. I really think China and Russia have made a mistake by going along with these sanctions. However, the sanctions are also much weakened. The sanctions, what do? The sanctions basically have they can block certain financial transactions. There's an arms embargo that includes battle tanks, combat aircraft, and missiles for Iran. There is some provision for the inspection of suspect cargoes on the high seas or in ports, but this is done by countries if there are reasonable grounds to think that contraband, so-called, is being moved. And then asset freezes and travel bans for individuals linked to the Revolutionary Guards. No restriction on Iran's oil trade. Well, that's, of course, the main demand of the Chinese. The Chinese said, we're not voting for this if we're going to have our oil cut off, and therefore nothing about Iranian oil exports. There is no comprehensive arms embargo. There is no comprehensive ban on financial dealings, and there is no legal requirement compelling Iran to allow foreign navies to board Iranian vessels to check them. So these outrageous things have not been included. Notice also the Russians got what they wanted, which was that there's no ban on delivering those advanced and sophisticated surface-to-air missiles, the A-300s, I believe. It's about time that those got delivered. That would help to close the door to lunatic adventurism by various powers, the U.S. and the Israelis above all. And there's also no ban on nuclear cooperation. So the Bushehr nuclear reactor is going to go critical and come online this summer, most likely. I think it's in August that the Bushehr reactor is expected to go online. So this is the situation. It is a Pyrrhic victory for the U.S. because the cost of having Turkey and Brazil vote against you, and Lebanon, even little Lebanon, a U.S. client state, abstains out of Arab solidarity or Muslim solidarity with the Iranians. This is not a good result. And this is now the fruit of all of Obama's charm offensive, his demagogic speeches in Turkey at the beginning, and then the Cairo speech, and all the rest of this, that he was open to the Islamic world. So where does it get him? Nowhere. He's actually further behind than when he started. So we're told that one of the things that kept the Chinese supporting this was a threat delivered by the Israelis, that the Israelis said to China, if you don't vote for these sanctions, we will bomb Iran, and that this was delivered behind the scenes. A plausible story, although not completely documented. So Pyrrhic victory for Hillary Clinton, for Obama, and for the charming Susan Rice at the United Nations. And we'll be back in a minute.